Hi, everybody, and good morning. Welcome to our week number 3 Twitch live stream for my intro psych class. I cannot believe that we are in week number 3 already, 1/4 of the way through our short class that we have together. I see several of you kind of getting logged in, joining me here live. If you could make sure that you put your name in the chat if you're not subscribed, that would be amazing. Can you all hear me and see me okay? If someone could let me know in the chat if you can hear and see me just fine, that would be amazing. Yes, okay, great. Thank you so much. I really appreciate that. I always am worried that you won't be able to, so that's perfect. Thank you, thank you. So what I want to do today is I want to give you a little bit of feedback about weeks 1 and 2, since those weeks have finished and I've done all of that grading. And then we'll look at some reminders for this week that we are going into, along with, of course, giving you the Twitch extra credit question and all of that. And if you have any questions for me, I will leave some time at the end where you can ask, or you can ask as we go through. But let's go ahead and go over to Canvas, and I want to talk a little bit about the first 2 weeks and where you can find your grade, and kind of some general feedback that I sent out by email on Monday night. So let's head over to Canvas together. And as I said, weeks 1 and 2 are done, and as of Monday, we started week number 3. And just some general things that I saw, and what you'll always see for me is once the 2 weeks have passed, traditionally that Monday night I will grade all of the materials, and then I'll send out an email with some kind of general feedback for the class as a whole. With your grade, you'll also receive a specific grade using the rubric, and typically some comments as well. And so I want to point out, if you go to announcements, when I sent out the announcement for weeks 3 and 4 that went out on Monday, there is a link in here and a video in here about finding your graded feedback in Canvas. So I made a short video, it's pretty brief, but it will show you where you can find your grade, where you can find your feedback. If you're wondering where it is and you couldn't find it, this video might be a little bit helpful for you. But I will always be giving you some feedback. Even if you get a perfect score, I might say great or excellent or something short. And if you missed some points, I'll traditionally let you know I would have liked a little bit more, or this part wasn't quite right. So make sure that you're finding your feedback. Use it as a learning opportunity as well. If you missed a couple of points on the first 4 discussions, hopefully you can adjust and do those things a little bit differently moving forward so that you don't miss points in the future. So what I saw in general, if we go through each discussion just really quickly, for discussion number 1, overall really nicely done. A lot of you had some fun, like kind of stereotypes or interesting ideas about psychology. Nicely done talking about the subfields. Where people tended to struggle a little bit was on this last bullet. A couple of people defined nature versus nurture a little incorrectly. Some people talked about nature as like trees and plants and the world around us. And while that might be true, in our context, it's not quite right. Nature more refers to biology and genetics, nurture being the environment and learning and experiences. So that was probably the biggest thing I saw on this one. Also, maybe just not quite giving me enough. So always remember to answer really comprehensively, show off your knowledge and comprehension of the materials. But overall, for the most part, really nicely done. On discussion number 2, I loved reading all of your research ideas that you came up with. A lot of people talked about things related to like serial killers and sleep. Those were by far the most 2 common things that people talked about. But with this one, the biggest reason was people just not quite giving me enough, kind of glossing over how you would examine the question was the biggest area. I wanted you to use some specific ideas, specific questions, but overall wonderful. I mean, I really, really enjoyed reading all of the things that you would study if you were a psychologist and had an unlimited budget and access to everything at your disposal. For discussions 3 and 4 for week number 2, Discussion number 3, you were looking at neurons and the 10% myth of the brain. The biggest area that I saw here was really on number 2, and I tried to give you a heads up with this when we were talking about it previously. I was really looking for you to highlight the idea of electrochemical communication, right? That neurons, when they communicate with each other, have an electrical piece controlled by ions and a chemical piece controlled by neurotransmitters. And so if you didn't mention both of those, you did lose a couple of points. A few of you talked about the 3 different types of neurons, which is great. But I wanted you to kind of go into that process of action potentials and what's going on in that chain of events where neurons communicate with each other. So that was the biggest thing that I saw here. Otherwise, a lot of you did a beautiful job talking about the origins of the myth and why we know it to be false. Again, for the most part, a lot of you got, like 13, 14, or 15 points. If you did miss a few points, try to look at that feedback so that you can adjust a little bit moving forward. Finally, with discussion number 4, I hope you enjoyed the opportunity to kind of smell some random items. I enjoyed reading about your associations. Some of you talking about, smelling coffee or chocolate or grass and reminding you of soccer in the morning, right? I loved it. It was really interesting to read. The biggest place that people struggled here was on this one. What are smell memories and why do they occur? I really wanted you to talk a lot about like the limbic system and the amygdala and like all of the connections and classical conditioning that can happen as well. So again, as always, just really make sure with these that you are elaborating, right? It's better to give me too much than not enough. I will never take off points for you giving me more, but when you don't give me quite enough, that's when you might lose a few. I also noticed that some of you did not respond to a classmate. So remember with each of the discussions that you are replying to my questions, and then you're also replying to a classmate. Ideally, you read through a few different people, but you can see here like Joanna posted and then a couple of people responded to her. And Kelly posted and then someone responded to her. So make sure that you're constantly, doing that piece. It's only 2 points, but those 2 points are definitely going to add up. And they're kind of an easy 2 points. So you want to make sure that you're always getting them. The only other thing that we had the last 2 weeks that I just want to point out was exam number 1. And I hope that you felt pretty good about the test. A lot of you did really, really well. There were a ton of A's, which makes me really happy, like a proud parent. And so what I would like to encourage you to do is always use the exams and any kind of graded assignment as a learning opportunity. If you didn't do as well as you would have liked on the exam, this is a wonderful time to kind of shake things up a little bit. So we are done with 1/4 of the class and 1 test. We have 3 more. So if you didn't study enough, study a little bit more this time. If you didn't do the study guide, maybe do it this time around. The study guide is really a big help for you. You could study a little bit at a time, start a little bit earlier. Hopefully you have kind of a good idea of what you could have done differently. If not, you're always welcome to make an appointment to meet with me or even email me. But the average score was an 88, just shy of an A. So a lot of A's on the exam. Several people got 100%. So I think a lot of you should be patting yourself on the shoulder, feeling really good about that. But if you wish you had done a little better, this is a wonderful time to kind of mix that up, study differently, prepare differently. Remember that you always have the study guide at your disposal because 2 weeks are open. So you could always kind of go as you go along, as you're reading the chapter. For this week, right, as you're reading chapter 5, make sure you understand and you know all the terms from chapter 5. And then as you go to 6, add the terms for chapter 6 and study and prepare like you would for a normal test. But most of you had plenty of time. The average amount of time was just shy of an hour. You had 75 minutes, so that tells me most of you were prepared and had enough time. And the average score was really solid, just about an A, just shy of an A. So hopefully you're feeling really good about the first 2 weeks. We will move on and leave them behind and moving into weeks 3 and 4. But before I move forward, are there any questions at all about anything from weeks 1 and 2? I will wait just a moment here while I see if there are any questions from the last 2 weeks. Just going to wait just a second while I answer this question on here. other advantage to being subscribed is you can whisper to me. You can ask me questions privately instead of in the chat. Okay, well, I'm going to move on. If you think of anything, please feel free to type it, put it in the chat, and I will, I'm monitoring it on my phone, and I'd be happy to answer it. Otherwise, we move into week number 3 as of Monday, as of a couple of days ago. And for week number 3, we're looking at chapter 5 on consciousness and chapter 6 on learning. We also have discussions 5 and 6. I have a little self-assessment that we'll talk about, just a chance to reflect on your progress so far. There's the extra credit, which we'll get to later. And then week number 4 is open at this point. Everything from weeks 3 and 4 is due by February 5th. So not this Sunday, but next Sunday. But you don't need to worry about week 4 quite yet. I'm going to focus on week number 3. And then in our next live stream next week, we'll talk about the materials for week number 4. So this week, chapters 5 and 6. Chapter 5, probably one of my favorite chapters in the book. But make sure that you read the chapter in the ebook, and then, of course, read through my lecture and watch the lecture video. Remember, you have those 3 components to do for every single chapter. So with the lecture, always going to be the same format, that 5-tab format that we have, where you have the objectives and summary. On the next page, we have Beyond the Book. I have some kind of entertaining videos on here. I think they're entertaining about change and inattentional blindness, so I hope you enjoy watching those. There's a little tutorial about sleep, which I think will be really helpful for you in remembering the different waves of sleep that go with each stage. A little bit about nightmares and sleep disorders and energy drinks. So really, I think, kind of interesting, fun chapter. There's a lot of in pop culture references, lots of movies featuring topics related to sleep. A fun clip here from Step Brothers about sleepwalking. There's a one here from Yes Man about energy drinks. There's some songs and books. Lots of different materials here for you to check out. The key terms and review, here are all the terms from chapter 5. And then finally at the end, I put some stuff in here about dream recall and analysis. And this might be a little bit helpful for you in the discussion this week. If you have a hard time remembering your dreams, I did make a video about how to remember them that might be helpful, along with a couple of dream websites that are fun to look at, and then some help for substance use disorders. So make sure, as always, you click on everything that's in there, read through it all, make sure you, anything that you do like that is going to help you to understand the materials. And then make sure you do the same thing for chapter 6, right? Read the chapter in the ebook, go through my lecture, watch the lecture video, take notes, pay attention like you would if you were taking this with me in person. And then you do have 2 discussions this week, so let's take a look at those really quickly together. Discussion number 5 is going to be